Hi there, welcome to Dreamy Histories channel. Tonight, we're going to explore one of the most terrifying jobs in human history. And trust me, after hearing this, you'll never complain about your cramped airplane seat again. Picture yourself curled up like a baby, suspended in a glass bubble beneath a 4-engine bomber, with nothing but a thin layer of plexiglass between you and 25,000 feet of empty air. Oh, and there are about 100 German fighters trying to turn you into confetti. Yeah, you probably wouldn't last the first 5 minutes, let alone a full combat tour. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these bedtime stories travel. All right, let's begin the story. You're 19 years old, maybe 20 if you're lucky, and you've just volunteered for the Army Air Forces because it seemed more glamorous than slogging through mud as an infantryman. The recruiter showed you posters of handsome pilots with leather jackets and pretty girls hanging off their arms. What he didn't mention was that for every pilot, there are 10 crew positions that are basically flying death traps. And congratulations, you've just drawn the shortest straw possible. You're going to be a ball turret gunner on a B-17 Flying Fortress. The Sperry ball turret is an engineering marvel. They tell you during training. It's a hydraulically operated sphere that hangs from the belly of the bomber like some kind of lethal Christmas ornament. Inside, you'll have two 50 caliber machine guns, 500 rounds of ammunition, and just enough room to exist if you're under 5'6" and don't mind folding yourself into positions that would make a yoga instructor wince. The mainstream historical fact everyone knows is that ball turret gunners had the highest casualty rate of any position in the bomber. Something like 60% didn't make it home. But here's what they don't tell you in the history books. Many gunners had to have their teeth pulled before deployment because the severe cold at altitude would make fillings expand and crack, causing agony that could incapacitate you during combat. The first time you see your turret, your stomach drops. It's smaller than you imagined, way smaller. The hatch is on the back, and you have to curl up with your knees to your chest just to fit inside. Your feet rest on two small panels. Your back is arched against the curved wall, and your face is inches from the gun sight. There's no room for a parachute. Let that sink in for a moment. If your plane goes down, you need to rotate the turret so the hatch aligns with the opening in the fuselage. Climb back into the plane. Find your chute, strap it on, and then bail out. All while the aircraft is possibly spinning, on fire, or missing large chunks of itself. Historians still argue whether the psychological impact of serving in a ball turret was worse than the physical danger. But honestly, it's like debating whether you'd rather drown or burn. Both options are nightmare fuel. The turret gunners developed their own gallows humor to cope. They joked that they were riding the ball, or called themselves the goldfish in the bowl. One veteran later said the worst part wasn't the German fighters or the flak. It was the endless hours of anticipation, curled up in that claustrophobic sphere, waiting for death to find you at 400 miles per hour. Your training starts at Laredo Army Airfield in Texas, where the temperature hits 110 degrees in the shade, if you can find any shade. The instructors are all combat veterans who've survived their 25 mission tours, and they have the 1,000-yard stare to prove it. They don't sugarcoat anything. "Gentlemen," your instructor says on the first day, his voice flat as old beer. "Look to your left, now look to your right." Statistics say only one of you three will come home with all your pieces attached. The training camp is a special kind of purgatory designed to transform soft American boys into killers who can function at 25,000 feet while people try to murder them. You wake up at 0430 hours to the sweet melody of a sergeant screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. Physical training comes first, running until you puke, then running some more because apparently cardiovascular fitness is crucial when you're going to spend your combat time folded up like a pretzel. The logic escapes you, but questioning orders gets you KP duty, peeling potatoes until your fingers are raw. After PT, you stumble to the mess hall, where they serve what the army generously calls breakfast: powdered eggs that taste like rubber, bacon that could double as shoe leather, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. You learn to wolf it down anyway, because you'll need every calorie when you're burning energy just trying to stay warm at altitude. A quirky detail the recruiting posters left out: ball turret gunners burn about 4,000 calories per mission just from shivering. Some guys gain weight during training only to come back from their tours looking like scarecrows. The classroom portion would be hilarious if it weren't so deadly serious. You sit through endless lectures on aircraft recognition. And let me tell you, telling a Focke-Wulf 190 from a P-47 Thunderbolt when it's diving at you at 400 miles per hour is like trying to identify car models while being hit by them on the freeway. They flash silhouettes on a screen for fractions of a second. "That's a Messerschmitt 109. The instructor barks. "Kill it." Next slide. "That's a P-51 Mustang. Don't kill it." The penalty for shooting down a friendly aircraft is court-martial, assuming you live long enough to face one. But the real education happens in the mock turrets, exact replicas of the Sperry Ball turret mounted on hydraulic platforms. You squeeze yourself inside and immediately realize that whoever designed this thing had a sadistic sense of humor. The hand controls are so sensitive that your first attempts at tracking targets look like you're having a seizure. The turret can rotate 360 degrees horizontally and 90 degrees vertically, which sounds great until you realize that means you can end up completely upside down, staring straight down at the earth below through nothing but glass. The gunnery instructors are merciless. They run film strips of fighter attacks while the hydraulic platform bucks and shakes, simulating combat conditions. You're trying to track a target while your inner ear is doing backflips. And if you don't score high enough, you wash out. Where do washouts go? Usually straight to the infantry, which suddenly makes being a human cannonball seem more appealing. The mainstream fact everyone knows is that aerial gunners had to be expert marksmen. What they don't mention is that about 30% of trainees washed out simply from motion sickness. Turns out not everyone can function while being tumbled like laundry. Historians still argue whether the compressed training timeline of World War II produced effective gunners or just threw bodies at the problem. In World War I, aerial gunners trained for 6 months. By 1943, they're pushing you through in 12 weeks. You learn to field strip and reassemble the M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun blindfolded because, surprise, you might have to clear a jam in complete darkness while wearing gloves thick enough to handle a Minnesota winter. The live fire exercises are where things get real. You're in the turret of an actual B-17 flying over the Gulf of Mexico, shooting at target sleeves towed by brave or possibly suicidal pilots in beat-up trainers. The first time you squeeze the triggers and feel the entire turret vibrate with the force of those twin 50s, you understand why veteran gunners are all partially deaf. The guns fire 800 rounds per minute each, and the noise inside that tiny metal sphere is like being inside a drum during a death metal concert. By week 10, you can climb into the turret and be ready to fire in under 30 seconds. You can estimate deflection angles in your sleep. You dream in mil dots and lead calculations. Your knees have permanent bruises from banging against the turret walls. And you've developed a weird ability to catnap in positions that would hospitalize a normal person. The final test is a mock combat mission where instructors in 86 Texans play the role of German fighters, making attack runs while you try to shoot them down with camera guns. On graduation day, you get your silver wings and your assignment. Most of you are headed to the 8th Air Force in England. Some lucky souls get the 15th in Italy, and a few poor bastards draw the Pacific Theatre. You're officially an aerial gunner now, with a life expectancy measured in weeks rather than years. They give you a 10-day leave to go home and see your family, though nobody mentions this might be the last time they see you vertical and breathing. The troop ship across the Atlantic is a converted luxury liner that now hauls 5,000 anxious airmen instead of wealthy passengers. You're stacked in bunks 5 high in what used to be the first-class swimming pool, and the whole ship reeks of vomit, fear, and unwashed bodies. Zigzagging to avoid U-boats means the journey takes 2 weeks instead of 5 days, and you spend most of it playing poker with money you'll probably never get to spend. When you finally see the grey coastline of England, it looks like salvation, but you have no idea you're actually arriving at the gates of hell with better tea. Your base is somewhere in East Anglia. They all look the same anyway. Muddy fields transformed into concrete runways surrounded by Quonset huts and despair. The British locals are friendly enough, though they look at you with a mixture of pity and resignation. They've seen too many fresh-faced Americans arrive full of bravado, only to disappear from the pub a few weeks later. You're assigned to a crew, and this is your new family: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, radio operator, 2 waist gunners, tail gunner, top turret gunner, and you, the ball turret gunner, or as the gallows humour goes, the man in the goldfish bowl. Your first morning at the base, you're awakened at 0300 by the CQ runner. Briefing in 30 minutes, he says, and your mouth goes dry. This is it. Your first mission. In the briefing room. When they pull back the curtain revealing the target map, a collective groan goes up. The red yarn stretches deep into Germany, to Bremen, a major port city bristling with anti-aircraft guns. The intelligence officer cheerfully informs you that you can expect moderate to heavy flak and possible fighter interception. In intelligence speak, this translates to, you're absolutely going to get shot at by everything the Germans can throw at you. You climb into your flying gear, long underwear, heated suit, which rarely works, leather jacket, Mae West life preserver, useless over land but regulations are regulations, and your parachute harness. By the time you waddle out to the plane, you look like the Michelin man's anemic cousin. Your B-17, Hell's Bell, painted on her nose alongside a scantily clad woman who looks nothing like anyone's actual Belle, sits there in the pre-dawn darkness. She's already been through 43 missions, which makes her a veteran. The ground crew chief pats her side affectionately. She's a tough old bird, he says. Brought her last crew home with half her tail shot off. The takeoff is an exercise in barely controlled chaos. The fort is loaded with 2,500 gallons of high-octane fuel and 6,000 pounds of bombs, making her about as aerodynamic as a flying brick. The pilot pushes all 4 throttles forward, and you're pressed back into the radio room floor, where ball turret gunners sit for takeoff. Can't risk damaging the turret on a runway bump. The plane lurches, struggles, and finally claws its way into the grey English dawn. You've got 2 hours of forming up with the squadron before you can climb into your position. 2 hours to think about what's coming. Once you're over the channel, you squeeze down into the turret. The first thing that hits you is the cold. It's already -20, and you're not even at altitude yet. You plug in your heated suit, which immediately fails because of course it does, and your oxygen mask. The mainstream historical fact is that B-17s flew at 25,000 feet to avoid light flak. What they don't mention is that at that altitude, exposed skin freezes in under 60 seconds, and if your oxygen system fails, you have maybe 3 minutes before you pass out and never wake up. As you cross the Dutch coast, the world explodes. The Germans have radar-directed flak, and they're good at their job. Black puffs of smoke appear all around you like deadly flowers blooming in fast forward. Each burst contains 2,000 metal fragments traveling at 3,000 feet per second. You hear them hitting the plane, pink, 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 like hail on a tin roof. Through your gun sight, you can see the flak burst walking closer. The German gunners adjusting their aim. A burst goes off right under your turret, and the concussion slams you against the top of your tiny sphere. For a moment, you can't breathe, can't think, can't do anything but hang there and wait for the next one. Historians still argue whether the psychological impact of flak was worse than fighter attacks. With fighters, at least you could shoot back. With flak, you just had to sit there and take it, like being strapped to a chair while someone shoots at you with a shotgun from 100 yards away. The veterans told you the secret was not to look at it, but that's like telling someone not to think about elephants. All you can see below you is those black puffs getting closer, and you know that each one could turn you into hamburger. Then someone screams over the intercom, "Fighters, 12 o'clock high." Your war has just begun. Your world shrinks to a sphere 4 feet in diameter, and for the next 4 hours, this is your entire universe. The turret rotates with electric motors that whine like angry wasps, and you quickly learn that every movement has to be deliberate, calculated. Jerk the controls too hard and you'll spin yourself dizzy. Move too slow, and that Focke-Wulf will stitch you up like a sewing machine. Your knees are drawn up to your chest, feet planted on the heel rests, and your spine is curved in a way that would make a chiropractor weep. After 30 minutes, the cramps start. After an hour, your legs are on fire. After 2 hours, you've transcended pain and entered a state of numb acceptance. The temperature is now -60 degrees Fahrenheit, and your heated suit gave up the ghost somewhere over the Dutch coast. You're wearing silk gloves under leather gloves under mittens, but your fingers still feel like frozen sausages. The guns have to be charged every few minutes to keep them from freezing solid. You pull the charging handles and work the bolts. A ritual as important as breathing. One mainstream fact everyone knows. Ball turret gunners couldn't wear parachutes due to space constraints. Here's what they don't tell you. Most gunners also ditched their flak vests because the extra bulk made it impossible to escape the turret quickly. You're literally choosing mobility over armor, betting your life on being able to get out fast rather than surviving a hit. The intercom is a constant stream of chatter, call-outs, and occasionally screaming. "Bandit, 3 o'clock level. Watch that one diving from too high. Johnson's hit, Johnson's hit." You swing the turret, tracking a Messerschmitt 109 as it barrels in from your 5 o'clock position. The trick is to lead him just right. These fighters are moving at 400 miles per hour, and your bullets take time to get there. You squeeze the triggers in short bursts, watching your tracers arc out into the sky. Every 5th round is a tracer, creating lines of light that look almost beautiful if they weren't meant to kill. Below you, Germany scrolls by like a map, cities, forests, rivers. all of it so peaceful from 25,000 feet. You can see farmers' fields laid out in neat rectangles, church steeples poking up from villages, smoke rising from chimneys. It's surreal. Down there, people are making breakfast, going to work, living normal lives while you're up here in your metal bubble, trying not to die. A quirky detail. Many ball turret gunners reported experiencing a strange disconnect, feeling like they were watching a movie rather than participating in actual combat. Psychologists later called it combat dissociation, but you just call it Tuesday. The bomber stream stretches for miles, hundreds of forts in their combat boxes, each plane maintaining precise spacing. From your position, you can see the ones below and to the sides getting hammered. You watch a B-17 take a direct flak hit in the bomb bay, and it simply ceases to exist. One moment it's there, the next it's just a cloud of fire and falling debris. No shoots. 10 men gone in less than a second. You key your throat mic to report it, but your voice catches. What's the point? Command already knows. They always know. Your turret suddenly slams sideways. You've been hit. There's a hole the size of a baseball in the plexiglass about 6 inches from your head, and the wind is screaming through it like a banshee. The temperature, already unbearable, drops even further. Ice immediately starts forming on everything. Your guns, your gun sight, your oxygen mask. You can feel the moisture in your breath freezing before it even leaves your mouth. But the turret still works. The guns still fire. And that's all that matters. You call up to the pilot. Ball turret hit but operational. His response is typically understated. Roger that. Try not to get hit again. Historians still argue whether the B-17 was adequately armed for daylight bombing. On paper, a formation of forts could put up an impressive curtain of defensive fire. In reality, the Germans figured out pretty quickly that the best way to attack was from 12 o'clock high, diving straight down at the nose where the defensive fire was weakest. From your position, you can barely elevate your guns enough to engage these head-on attacks. You watch fighters slice through the formation like sharks, knowing there's nothing you can do but hope they pick someone else. The human body wasn't designed to function in these conditions. Your oxygen mask is clogged with ice from your breath, and you have to squeeze the rubber bag every few minutes to break it up. If you don't, you'll slowly asphyxiate without even realizing it. Hypoxia is insidious. First you feel euphoric, then confused, then you just drift off. They found one gunner after a mission, frozen solid in his turret, with a peaceful smile on his face. He'd been dead for 2 hours, but nobody noticed because his turret kept rotating on its electric motors, making it look like he was still tracking targets. The first time you see fighters coming head-on, your brain simply refuses to process what's happening. They look like specks at first, innocent dots against the pale sky. Then suddenly, they're growing larger at an impossible rate. The closing speed is over 600 miles per hour. Your bomber trudging along at 150. The Me-109 screaming in at 450 plus. In the space of a heartbeat, those dots transform into snarling machines spitting fire, and you understand with crystal clarity why veteran gunners drink themselves to sleep every night. The attack profile is terrifyingly simple. The German pilots dive from 30,000 feet, building up tremendous speed, level out about a mile ahead of your formation, and come straight at the nose. They have maybe 3 seconds of firing time before they have to break away or risk collision. 3 seconds doesn't sound like much until you realize their 420mm cannons and 2 machine guns can pump out 150 pounds of steel in that time. From your position hanging under the plane, you watch them bore in like guided missiles with a death wish, You swing your turret forward and up, straining against the mechanical limits. The guns will elevate to 90 degrees, theoretically, but at that angle, you're shooting almost straight up, and the physics are all wrong. The mainstream historical fact is that head-on attacks caused 60% of bomber casualties in 1943. Here's what the history books leave out. The Germans specifically aimed for the cockpit and the nose compartment, trying to kill the pilots and bombardier. If they succeeded, the plane became a 10-man coffin falling 5 miles to Earth. Some crews actually welded extra armor plate in front of the pilot's seats, though this threw off the plane's balance and made it fly like a drunk pig. 12 o'clock level, here they come. The navigator's voice cracks over the intercom. You can see them now. 4 Focke-Wulf 190s in perfect line abreast formation. The closing rate is so fast your brain can't calculate the lead properly. You squeeze off a burst, watching your tracers pass harmlessly behind them. The top turret and nose guns open up, the whole plane vibrating with the fury of defensive fire. The German leader's wings light up with muzzle flashes, and you actually see the cannon shells coming, glowing white-hot teardrops of death floating towards you in seeming slow motion. The impacts sound like someone hitting the plane with a giant sledgehammer. Wham, 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 wham. The fort shudders and bucks. Through your little window on hell, you see pieces of aluminum skin peeling away from the wing. Something hot splatters across the inside of your turret. Hydraulic fluid. You hope. Though it could just as easily be something that used to be inside one of your crewmates. The fighters flash past so close you can see the pilots' faces, see the oil streaks on their engine cowlings, see the victory marks painted on their fuselages. Each mark represents a bomber like yours, 10 men like your crew. The intercom erupts in chaos. Fisher's hit. That's the navigator. Get a tourniquet on him. Number 3 engine's on fire. Feather it, feather it. Tail gunner, you still with us? Yeah, but my turret's jammed. You're trying to track the fighters as they pull up for another pass, but your hydraulics are sluggish. There's a growing puddle of something viscous under your feet, and the turret's making grinding noises that definitely weren't in the technical manual. A quirky detail from the war. Ball turret gunners often stuffed newspaper in their flight suits for extra insulation, which had the unintended effect of making hydraulic leak detection easier. The paper would soak up the fluid, and you'd know you had problems when you started getting wet. Historians still argue whether the gunners' claims of fighter kills were accurate. By official tallies, bomber gunners shot down thousands of German fighters. In reality, with 10 gunners often firing at the same target, kill credits were inflated by a factor of 5 or more. But none of that matters when you're watching an FW-190 boring in with its nose lit up like a Christmas tree. You don't care who gets credit. You just want the bastard to burn before he kills you all. The second pass is even worse because now they know your number 3 engine is out and you're struggling to keep formation. Fighters are like wolves. They target the weak, the stragglers, the wounded. You're dropping back, losing the protective firepower of the formation. Close it up, close it up. The pilot's straining, pushing the 3 good engines past their limits. But physics is physics, and you're falling behind. In your turret, you can see the rest of the squadron pulling away, and you know what comes next. Once you're out of the formation, you're dead. The fighters will circle like sharks and take their time picking you apart. The controls are getting harder to move. Whatever's leaking is freezing in the sub-zero air, turning to slush in the mechanisms. You're having to use both hands to traverse the turret, fighting against mechanical resistance and your own freezing muscles. Another fighter rolls in from 7 o'clock low, And this time you nail him. See your tracers punching through his canopy. See him wobble and pour smoke. But there's no time to celebrate because 2 more are already setting up for the next attack. And your ammunition counter shows you're down to less than 100 rounds per gun. The cold is a living thing that wants to crawl inside your body and stop your heart. At 25,000 feet, the temperature outside your turret reads minus 62 degrees Fahrenheit, though the gauge might be broken because it's been pegged there for the last hour. Your heated suit is a joke. Half the wires burned out over Belgium, and the rest are providing about as much warmth as a birthday candle in a blizzard. You've lost all feeling in your toes despite the 3 pairs of socks, and your fingers move like rusty hinges even through the silk-wool leather glove combination that's supposed to keep them functional. Every breath is a battle. The oxygen comes through your mask so cold it burns your lungs, and the moisture from your exhalations freezes instantly, building up layers of ice on the inside of the mask. You have to squeeze the ice out every few minutes or risk suffocating on your own frozen breath. The mainstream fact everyone knows is that frostbite was a major casualty source for bomber crews. What they don't tell you is that ball turret gunners had it worst because they couldn't move around to maintain circulation. Your position is essentially a meat locker with windows, and you're the meat. Your neck is cramping from looking up through the gun sight for the past 2 hours. Ice has formed on your eyelashes, and every time you blink, they try to freeze shut. The fleece collar of your jacket is rock hard with frozen moisture, and where it touches your neck, it's like being caressed by a knife. You try to shift position to relieve the agony in your lower back, but there's nowhere to go. The turret is precisely large enough to contain you and your suffering. Nothing more. A dark joke among ball turret gunners. Why did the chicken cross the road? To get out of this fucking turret. The plexiglass dome around you is frosting over from the inside, cutting visibility. You scrape at it with your gloved hand, but that just smears the ice around. Through the clouded sections, Germany looks like an impressionist painting, all blurred edges and uncertain shapes. You're flying by instruments now. If you can call squinting through a frozen gun sight instruments. The intercom crackles. Ball gunner, you still alive down there? You try to respond, but your throat mic is frozen to your neck. You bang on it with a fist until it breaks free, taking a small patch of skin with it. Still here, you croak, though here is becoming an increasingly philosophical concept. You're starting to experience the peculiar detachment that comes with extreme cold, your mind floating somewhere above your frozen body, observing with mild interest as your hands fumble with the gun charging handles. The guns need to be worked every few minutes, or the oil in the mechanisms will freeze solid. You've seen it happen. A gunner lets his weapons ice up, and when the fighters come, he's got 2 very expensive clubs instead of machine guns. A quirky historical detail. Some gunners actually urinated on their guns during pre-flight to test if they were properly oiled. If the urine froze, you needed more oil. The ground crews loved that. Your oxygen hose has developed a kink where it connects to your mask, and you're getting that floating feeling that means hypoxia is creeping in. You fumble with the connection, but your fingers won't cooperate. They're like wooden blocks attached to your hands. Finally, you manage to clear the kink, and oxygen floods back into your system. The relief is temporary. You know it'll freeze up again in minutes. Everything freezes up here. Men have been found after missions with their eyeballs frozen to their gun sights. Their tears turn to ice, welding them to their weapons. Historians still argue whether the Army Air Forces adequately prepared crews for the extreme conditions of high-altitude combat. The training films showed handsome actors in clean uniforms, not the reality of men with snot frozen to their faces, crying from pain and fear. those tears immediately turning to ice. The medics back at base will later count 17 separate frostbite injuries on your body, rate them by degree like they're grading meat. 2nd degree on your nose, 3rd degree on 3 toes, 1st degree scattered across your face like you've been peppered with frozen buckshot. The temperature is affecting everything now. Your turret rotation is sluggish, grinding through ice buildup in the gear rings. The ammunition belts are stiff as iron bars, and you worry they won't feed properly when you need them. Your parachute, sitting in the radio room above you, might as well be on the moon. If you had to bail out now, your frozen body probably couldn't make the climb out of the turret anyway. You'd ride this ice cube all the way down, a human popsicle in a plexiglass wrapper. You flex your trigger fingers constantly, trying to maintain some flexibility. The other gunners are fighting their own battles with the cold. You can hear them over the intercom. Voices slurred with numbness. Can't feel my hands. Stevenson's passed out. Hypoxia. My turret's frozen solid. The pilot's trying to drop altitude to warmer air, but there are still fighters around, and going lower means coming into range of more accurate light flak. It's a devil's choice. Freeze to death at altitude or get shot to pieces down low. You know something's wrong when the lead plane fires a red flare. That's the signal for the deputy lead to take over, which means Colonel Morrison's ship has taken serious damage. You watch it peeling away from the formation. 2 engines feathered, trailing smoke like a dying comet. The radio chatter tells the story in fragments. Navigators dead. Pilots hit bad. Trying to make Switzerland. They won't make it. Everyone knows it. But nobody says it. Switzerland is 300 miles away, and they're losing altitude fast. In your frozen bubble, you whisper a prayer for them, though you're not sure anyone's listening up here. The target is Schweinfurt, and even saying the name makes your stomach clench. The ball-bearing factories there are crucial to the German war machine, which means they're defended like the Führer's own bedroom. Intelligence said, expect heavy opposition. Intelligence has a gift for understatement that borders on criminal. As you approach the initial point where the bomb run begins, the sky ahead turns black, not grey, not dark, black. The Germans are putting up a flak barrage so thick it looks like a thundercloud made of steel and hate. Jesus Christ, someone whispers over the intercom, forgetting radio discipline. The pilot immediately snaps. Cut the chatter. But you can hear the fear in his voice too. The mainstream historical fact is that the Schweinfurt raids were among the costliest of the war. On this day, October 14th, 1943, though of course you don't know you're living through what historians will call Black Thursday, the 8th Air Force will lose 60 bombers. That's 600 men. What the history books don't capture is the sound of a formation dying, the way the radio channels overflow with maydays and death rattles, coordinates of where crews are going down, final messages home that will never be delivered. You enter the flak field, and it's like flying into a giant blender. The bursts are so close together they merge into a continuous roar. Shrapnel rattles against your turret like hail from hell. Through the tiny gaps in the flak cloud, you can see bombers getting hit. One loses a wing and spirals down like a maple seed. Another explodes in a ball of fire so bright it leaves after images on your retinas. The concussions from near misses slam you around inside your turret. Your nose is bleeding from the pressure changes, the blood freezing instantly on your oxygen mask. Bombardier to pilot, coming up on target. How the bombardier can see anything through this mess is beyond you. But that's his job. For the next few minutes, the plane has to fly straight and level. No evasive action. While he lines up the drop, you might as well paint a bullseye on the plane and hang out a sign saying free shots. The fighters know this too, and here they come. A whole staffel of Messerschmitt 110s setting up for beam attacks while you're stuck flying predictable as a train on tracks. Your turret traverses right, tracking a 110 as it rolls in from 3 o'clock level. The twin-engine fighter looks massive compared to the 109s, bristling with cannons and rockets. You squeeze off a burst, watching your tracers converge on his nose. Hits. You see pieces flying off, see him wobble and pour smoke, but he keeps coming. And now you can see the rockets under his wings starting to fire. The rockets are new, something the intelligence boys didn't mention. They streak toward the formation trailing smoke, and you realize with sick certainty that one is headed straight for your plane. Time does that strange combat thing where it simultaneously speeds up and slows down. The rocket seems to float toward you, spinning lazily, while your mind races through every prayer you half remember from Sunday school. It passes maybe 10 feet below your turret, so close you can see the German manufacturing stamps on its side, and slams into the B-17 flying off your left wing. The explosion is catastrophic. The fort simply comes apart in the air, big pieces cartwheeling away, the tail section spinning like a thrown playing card. No chutes. There never are when they take direct hits. Historians still argue whether the daylight bombing campaign was worth the cost. Sitting in your turret watching friends die, the strategic arguments seem pretty fucking academic. A quirky detail from the mission reports. Gunners started painting small crosses on their turrets for each mission survived, like convicts marking time, except instead of counting days until freedom, you're counting missions until the law of averages catches up. 25 missions is the magic number for a completed tour. At current loss rates, the mathematics are brutally simple. You have about a 30% chance of making it. Bombs away. The fort lurches upward as 6,000 pounds of high explosives leave the bay. Far below, you can see the first explosions hitting the factory complex, smoke and fire billowing up. For a moment, you feel satisfaction. At least if you die today, you accomplish something. Then reality reasserts itself. You're still 400 miles inside enemy territory. You've already lost 8 planes from your group, and the fighters are reforming for another attack. The bomb run is over. Now you just have to survive the journey home. The bailout order comes sudden and sharp. This is the pilot. We're on fire and I can't hold her. Bail out. Bail out. Bail out. Your worst nightmare is now your reality. The plane lurches violently to the left, and you know the pilot's fighting to keep it level long enough for everyone to escape. In the bull turret, you're the last priority. Everyone knows it takes precious time for you to get out. Time the plane might not have. Your hands, numb with cold just moments ago, suddenly work with desperate efficiency as you slam the turret controls, trying to rotate it so the hatch aligns with the fuselage opening. The turret won't budge. The hydraulics are shot, probably have been for the last hour, running on fumes and prayer. You're cranking the manual controls, but something's jammed. Maybe flak damage, maybe ice, maybe just the universe's cruel sense of humor. The plane tilts further, and through your plexiglass dome you can see the ground spinning lazily below, getting larger. The intercom is chaos. Johnson's out. Radio room clear. Get out, get out. You're screaming too, though whether it's profanity or prayer, you can't tell. Finally, the turret breaks free, rotating with a grinding shriek. You're fumbling with the hatch now, but your frozen fingers can't work the latches. The mainstream fact everyone knows is that ball turret gunners had the lowest survival rate when bombers went down. Here's what they don't tell you. Many were found dead still in their turrets in the wreckage, not because they were trapped by damage, but because their frostbitten hands simply couldn't operate the escape mechanism. You slam your fist against the latch, feel something in your hand break, but the hatch pops open. The climb out of the turret is like being born in reverse, a violent, painful emergence from a tiny space into chaos. The radio room is filled with smoke and the shriek of wind through holes in the fuselage. Your parachute is where you left it, thank God. But as you're struggling into the harness with hands that won't cooperate, the plane lurches again. You slam into the bulkhead hard enough to see stars. Through the radio room window, you can see the right wing is entirely engulfed in flames. The metal is actually melting, drops of molten aluminum streaming back like silver rain. You stumble toward the bomb bay, where the doors are already open. The navigator is there, standing at the edge, and he looks back at you with eyes wide as dinner plates. "See you on the ground," he shouts, and steps out into nothing. You're right behind him when the plane bucks like a wounded animal and you're thrown backward. When you get up, you realize you're alone. Everyone else is gone. It's just you and the dying airplane, and she's starting her final spiral. The centrifugal force of the spin pins you against the fuselage. You're crawling now, fighting against gravity that wants to paste you to the aluminum skin like a bug on a windshield. The bomb bay looks like a rectangle of grey sky, impossibly far away. Your broken hand is screaming, but you use it anyway, clawing your way forward inch by inch. A quirky detail. Many airmen reported that in these moments, they thought not of God or country or family, but of absurdly mundane things. A girl's perfume, the taste of a Coca-Cola, the sound of a baseball hitting a glove. You reach the bomb bay and hesitate for just a moment. Below is 18,000 feet of nothing, and somewhere down there is Germany, which is not exactly friendly territory for American airmen. The plane shudders, and you hear the terrible sound of metal tearing. The wing is coming off. It's now or never. You close your eyes and roll out of the bomb bay like a sack of potatoes. Graceful as a brick, brave as a man with no other options. The slipstream hits you like a giant's fist, tumbling you end over end. Your training said to wait before pulling the ripcord, to get clear of the plane. But your training didn't mention what it's like to fall through space while your aircraft disintegrates around you. Pieces of B-717 are falling with you, sheets of aluminum, a propeller blade still spinning, someone's flak helmet tumbling by like a steel snowflake. You pull the ripcord, and for a heart-stopping moment, nothing happens. Then the chute blossoms above you with a crack like a rifle shot, and the harness nearly cuts you in half as it arrests your fall. Historians still argue whether it was better to be captured by German soldiers or civilians. The soldiers usually followed the Geneva Convention. The civilians, who'd been bombed for years, often didn't. Hanging in your parachute, drifting down toward a country that wants you dead. You remember the intelligence briefing. If you're captured, give only name, rank, and serial number. They made it sound so simple, like ordering coffee. They didn't mention what it's like to float down from the sky you've just filled with death, watching the earth rise to meet you, knowing that if you survive the landing, your war has only just begun. You're into your 15th mission when the miracle happens. P-51 Mustangs appear on the horizon like silver angels with Detroit engines. For months, you've been making these deep penetration raids with fighter escort that turns back at the German border, leaving you naked and afraid for the worst part of the journey. The fighters simply didn't have the range to go all the way to targets like Berlin or Munich. But now, here they are, those beautiful bubble-canopied bastards with drop tanks under their wings. And for the first time in months, You remember what hope feels like. Little friends, 2 o'clock high. The tail gunner's voice cracks with something like joy. You crane your neck to see them through your scratched plexiglass. And sure enough, there they are, a squadron of Mustangs dropping their external tanks and peeling off to engage the German fighters that have been setting up for another head-on pass. The P-51s dive into the Messerschmitts like hawks among pigeons, and suddenly the hunters become the hunted. You watch a 109 try to run, but the Mustang on his tail is faster, more agile, better in every way that matters. The German fighter comes apart under the American 6.50 calibers, and you actually cheer. The mainstream history says the P-51 changed everything, made daylight bombing viable, won the air war. All true, but what they don't capture is what it meant to the men in the bombers. Before the Mustangs, every mission felt like Russian roulette with 5 bullets in the cylinder. Fighter attacks were inevitable, losses catastrophic. Some bomb groups were losing 80% of their original crews. The math was simple and brutal. At that rate, your 25-mission tour was a death sentence, written in arithmetic. Morale wasn't just low, it was subterranean. Men were cracking up, refusing to fly, shooting themselves in the foot to get out of missions. But the Mustangs arrived just a few months too late for so many. You think about your original crew, Thompson the tail gunner, boarded over Hamburg when a rocket blew his turret clean off the plane. Rodriguez the radio operator, burned alive when flak hit the oxygen system over Stuttgart. Peters the waist gunner, last seen falling without a chute over Münster because fighters shot him while he was trying to bail out. You're flying with replacements now. Kids who look at you like you're some kind of ancient veteran, even though you've only been here 4 months. 4 months is a lifetime in the 8th Air Force. The Mustangs can't be everywhere, though. They have their own problems, mechanical failures, navigation errors, and German fighters that have learned to avoid them and wait for gaps in the coverage. On your 18th mission to Frankfurt, you watch a P-51 escort literally run out of fuel and have to turn back. The pilot waggling his wings apologetically as he leaves. 20 minutes later, the Wolves arrive. A whole grouper of Focke-Wulf 190s, maybe 30 planes, coming in from the sun. Your fighter cover is busy somewhere else, and suddenly it's 1943 all over again. A quirky detail about the air war. American fighter pilots were rotated home after 200 combat hours, while bomber crews had to complete 25 missions. A fighter pilot might fly 200 hours in 2 months. A bomber crew's 25 missions, at 8-10 hours each, meant 200 to 250 hours of combat time, but spread over 4 to 6 months of watching friends die. The fighter jockeys were knights of the air, hunting for glory and aces. You're just trying to survive another milk run that turned into a meat grinder. Historians still argue whether the escort fighters should have been released to hunt German aircraft more aggressively or stick close to the bombers. From your position in the ball turret, the argument is academic. When fighters are boring in and your little friends are nowhere to be seen, all the strategic doctrine in the world won't stop those 20mm cannon shells from turning you into hamburger. You've learned to recognize individual German pilots by their attack styles. There's one with a yellow nose who always comes in slightly low, another who does a little roll at the breakaway. You've been shooting at the same men for months. A strange, intimate dance of death at 400 miles per hour. The Mustangs do change the game, though. By spring of 1944, you might actually survive your tour. The loss rates drop from catastrophic to merely horrible. Instead of losing 60 bombers in a single mission, you're losing 6. your odds improve from virtually certain death to probable survival, which passes for good news in this business. You've got 7 missions left, and for the first time, you can imagine a future that doesn't involve burning alive in a metal tube over Germany. But those 7 missions still have to be flown, and the Germans aren't giving up. They're sending up jets now, Me-262s that are so fast your turret can barely track them. They flash through the formation like sharks, cannon blazing, gone before you can draw a bead. The war is clearly lost for Germany, but nobody told these pilots. They're still coming up to fight, still dying in droves, still occasionally taking one of you with them. The little friends help, but they can't stop time or change the basic equation. You're still a target, and there are still people trying very hard to kill you. Your 21st mission is different, a joint operation with the RAF, which means you're flying at night. As you climb aboard a Lancaster bomber at a British base, everything feels wrong. The Lance is a different beast from your B-17, all angles and edges where the fort is curves. The ball turret doesn't exist here. Instead, you're assigned to the rear turret, a powered installation that the Brits call the Tail End Charlie. 4 303 machine guns instead of the big 50s you're used to, and you're completely isolated from the crew, sitting in your own little fighter cockpit, grafted onto the bomber's ass. The British way of war is alien to everything you've learned. No tight formations, no mass defensive firepower. Each bomber flies alone in the stream, separated by time and distance to avoid collisions in the dark. The gunners wear different gear. Their electrically heated suits actually work. For one thing, the RAF tail gunner showing you the position has removed the central plexiglass panel from his turret. Better vision, he explains casually. Gets a bit nippy, though. Nippy, at 20,000 feet over Germany, with 200-mile-per-hour winds blasting directly into your face. These people are insane. Your target is Hamburg, and the briefing is unlike any you've attended. The British commander talks about gardening, mining harbours, cookie, 4,000-pound blast bombs, and window, aluminum strips to confuse radar. The whole thing sounds like a demented cooking show until you realize these cheerful euphemisms describe ways to burn entire cities to the ground. The mainstream fact is that RAF Bomber Command killed more civilians than the American Daylight Campaign. What they don't tell you is how the crews felt about it. Some gloried in the destruction. Others drank themselves senseless between missions, trying to forget the smell of burning cities that somehow penetrated even into their sealed oxygen masks. You take off at dusk, the Lancaster clawing its way into the darkening sky with a bomb load that would make a B-17 weep, 14,000 pounds, including a massive cookie that looks like a garbage can designed by a psychopath. The flight across the North Sea is eerie. No formation lights, no reference points, just darkness above and below. In your turret, you can't even see your own aircraft's wings. You're a disembodied gun platform floating through ink, connected to the rest of the crew only by the intercom's tinny voices. The first sign of the target is a glow on the horizon like a false dawn. Hamburg is already burning from the Pathfinder aircraft that went in first, dropping coloured flares to mark the aiming points. As you get closer, the glow resolves into individual fires. Entire city blocks ablaze, creating their own weather systems. The thermal updrafts grab the Lancaster and throw it around like a leaf. In your turret, isolated from the aircraft's centre of gravity, the motion is sickening. You're not flying anymore. You're riding a bucking bronco through hell's own thermals. The flak is different at night, beautiful in a terrifying way. The shells burst in bouquets of orange and white, tracer streams rising like neon ladders. The Germans use searchlights, dozens of them, electric blue fingers probing for bombers. When one finds you, others converge, and suddenly you're coned, trapped in a pyramid of brilliant light, while every gun in Hamburg tries to kill you. The pilot throws the Lance into a corkscrew dive, and in your turret, you're whipped around like a stone in a sling. G-forces crush you into your seat, then try to throw you through the turret roof. Your vision grays out, but you keep scanning for fighters because that's your job. Night fighters are a different nightmare from their day counterparts. They hunt using radar, sneaking up from below where you can't see them. The first you know about them is when cannon shells start punching through your aircraft. A quirky detail. Some RAF gunners believed German night fighters could home in on the static electricity bombers built up flying through clouds, so they'd drag chains from their aircraft to ground themselves. Whether it worked or not, nobody knew. But when you're flying through hell, you'll try anything. Historians still argue whether area bombing of cities was justified. Sitting in your turret watching Hamburg burn, creating a firestorm that will kill 40,000 people tonight. You don't feel like arguing philosophy. You just want to drop the bombs and get home. But there's something different about seeing a city die at night. In daylight, from 25,000 feet, targets look like map coordinates. At night, from 18,000 feet, you can see that those are neighborhoods burning, homes and hospitals and schools. The RAF crews cope with dark humor, darker than anything you've heard in the American messes. They sing drinking songs about dead Germans on the flight home. You make it back to England as dawn breaks, the Lancaster touching down with fuel tanks nearly dry. As you climb out of the turret, legs shaking from 7 hours of combat, the British tail gunner who trained you is waiting. "Not bad for a colonial," he says with a grin. "Fancy doing it again tonight?" You stare at him. The RAF flies mission after mission. No 25 and done. Some of these men have flown 60, 70, even 100 operations. They're all mad. You realize the entire RAF is completely insane. You've never been happier to climb aboard a truck back to your American base. The Pacific is a different war entirely. When you report to your new squadron in the Marianas, fresh from your European tour, you expect to be treated like the combat veteran you are. Instead, the B-29 crews look at you like you're a child who's wandered into the adults' table. The superforts are different, buddy. Your new aircraft commander tells you. Everything you learned in B-17s, forget it. Out here, we don't fight fighters. We fight the Japanese mind. The B-29 is a technological marvel that makes your old fort look like a Wright brothers experiment. Pressurized cabins mean you can fly in just your flight suit. No more frozen hell of electrically heated gear that never worked. The central fire control system is computerized. You aim the guns, but a mechanical brain calculates the lead and deflection. Your position isn't a ball turret but a plexiglass blister on the side of the aircraft, giving you a panoramic view of the Pacific's endless blue. It should be paradise compared to Europe. It's not. Your first mission is a daylight raid on Tokyo from 32,000 feet. The jet stream up there is running at 200 miles per hour, and when you turn downwind for the bomb run, your ground speed hits 500 km/h. It's like trying to hit a target from a rocket sled. The mainstream fact everyone knows is that B-29s eventually switched to low-level night incendiary raids. What they don't mention is why. The high-altitude precision bombing was a complete failure. You're dropping from so high that a 1-degree swan error means missing by half a mile. And with the jet stream throwing everything sideways, you might as well be bombing with your eyes closed. Then come the Japanese fighters. and they're nothing like the methodical Germans. A Zero pulls alongside your formation, just out of gun range, and the pilot opens his canopy. He's close enough that you can see his face, see him draw his katana and wave it at you before rolling inverted and diving away. It's theater, Bushido warrior bullshit, but it works. Every gunner is rattled. These aren't the professionals you faced over Germany. These are fanatics who see death as a promotion. The first kamikaze attack happens on your 5th mission. You're watching a damaged Zero trailing smoke, expecting the pilot to bail out, when he suddenly noses over and accelerates straight at the lead plane. Your brain refuses to process what you're seeing. Pilots don't do that. It's against every rule of survival, every instinct of self-preservation. But this pilot does, boring in with suicidal determination. Every gun in the formation opens up, turning the Zero into Swiss cheese. But momentum carries it forward. It slams into the B-29's wing root in an explosion of aviation fuel and human madness. You watch the Superfort cartwheel out of the sky, breaking apart as it falls. 10 seconds ago, those were people you ate breakfast with. Now they're confetti scattered across the Pacific. The intercom is silent. What is there to say? In Europe, death at least followed rules. Fighters tried to kill you, but they also tried to survive. This is something else, something that makes your skin crawl. How do you fight someone who's already decided to die? A quirky detail from the Pacific Air War. B-29 gunners started carrying personal sidearms after reports of Japanese pilots trying to ram bombers with their landing gear down, hoping to entangle in the props and bring both planes down. The idea of shooting at enemy pilots with your .45 through the blister window sounds insane until you see a Tony fighter approaching gear down at your exact altitude. The pilot visible in his cockpit, already dead in his mind, using his aircraft as a guided missile with a human brain for a guidance system. Historians still argue whether the atomic bombs were necessary. From your blister position, watching Tokyo burn from the incendiary raids, you understand both sides. The March 9-10 raid alone killed more people than either atomic bomb. 100,000 dead in one night of fire. You're flying so low now, 5,000 feet, that you can smell the burning city through the aircraft's ventilation system. It's sweet and acrid and wrong. The smell of wood and paper and people. The thermals from the firestorm below toss your B-29 around like a toy. And several aircraft are actually flipped inverted by the updrafts. But you also see the alternative. Every mission, more kamikazes. The Japanese aren't surrendering. They're accelerating their suicide attacks. Intelligence says they're training civilians to attack the invasion beaches with sharpened bamboo spears. Women and children, they say. The whole nation preparing to die rather than surrender. You think about having to fly support missions over the invasion, watching American soldiers massacre and be massacred by an entire population gone mad with Bushido. The atomic bomb, when it comes, seems almost merciful by comparison. Your last mission is on August 14th, 1945. You don't know it's your last. Nobody tells you the Emperor is about to surrender. You're hitting an oil refinery, flying through flak and fighters same as always. A kamikaze makes a run at your plane, and you pour fire into him, watching your tracers sparkle off his engine cowling. He breaks off, trailing smoke, and for a moment you think he's going to crash. Then he levels out and comes around for another run. Your guns jam, the one time in 50 missions, and you can only watch as he lines up on you. This is it, you think. Survived Europe to die in the Pacific. Then his engine seizes and he cartwheels into the ocean. Tomorrow, the war ends. Today, you almost died for nothing. The waist gunner position is where claustrophobia goes to die. You're standing in the middle of the fuselage with nothing but a thin aluminum skin between you and the outside world, manning a .50 caliber that swings on a mount designed by someone who clearly never had to use it while wearing 3 layers of flight gear. The windows are open to the slipstream. No plexiglass here, just rectangular holes in the plane's side that let in wind, cold, and occasionally German steel. Your first time at the waist gun. You think it'll be easier than the ball turret. You can stand up, move around, stretch your legs. Then you hit altitude and realize you've traded one kind of hell for another. The wind blasts through those open windows is like being punched repeatedly by an invisible boxer. It doesn't just blow, it screams, howls, shrieks at 200 miles per hour, carrying away any words you try to shout to the other waist gunner standing just 6 feet away. The cold is different too. Not the still frozen tomb of the ball turret, but a living, clawing thing that finds every gap in your gear. The mainstream fact everyone knows is that waist gunners had to deal with spent brass from their guns. What they don't tell you is what happens to that brass in combat. The floor becomes a skating rink of empty casings rolling around, trying to trip you as you pivot to track targets. During one particularly intense fighter attack, you slip on brass and go down hard, cracking your head on the gun mount. You see stars, taste blood, but you get up and keep firing because what else are you going to do? The brass is hot when ejected, and more than one gunner has had casings go down his collar, leaving burn marks like little brands of cowardice. You couldn't even keep your gear sealed properly. The worst part about waist gunning is the visibility. In the ball turret, you mostly saw below and to the sides. Here, you see everything, including what happens to the rest of your crew when things go wrong. During a mission to Regensburg, flak tears through the radio room just forward of your position. The radio operator, a kid from Iowa who showed everyone pictures of his girl back home, takes a chunk of shrapnel the size of a dinner plate through his chest. He looks at you with surprise, opens his mouth to say something, and then just deflates. You can't help him. You can't even move his body. You have to stand there for the next 3 hours, stepping over him every time you need to traverse your gun to the other side. The waist guns have a limited field of fire. You can't shoot forward past a certain point without hitting your own tail. Can't shoot up without hitting the wing. This creates blind spots that German fighters exploit with mathematical precision. They've been fighting B-17s for 2 years now. They know exactly where you can't reach them. A 109 pilot parks himself in your blind spot and just sits there, taking his time, lining up his shot while you scream obscenities and try to will your gun mount to traverse just 5 more degrees. During fighter attacks, the waist position turns into pure chaos. You and the other waist gunner are dancing around each other, trying not to get tangled in each other's oxygen hoses while tracking targets on both sides. Your side, he screams, and you pivot to see 3 Focke-Wulfs rolling in from 4 o'clock level. You're firing. He's firing. Spent brass is flying everywhere, and the intercom is a cacophony of calls. Bandits 6 o'clock high. Number 2 engines hit. Get those fighters off our tail. The noise is beyond description. Your own guns. His guns. The top turret right above your head. All hammering away while the airplane shakes and rattles like it's coming apart. A quirky piece of history. Waist gunners developed their own sign language to communicate during combat. Pointing with an open hand meant fighters. Closed fist meant flak bursts. Thumb across throat meant guns jammed. You could have entire conversations without speaking, which was good because between the wind noise and the guns, you couldn't hear someone screaming directly into your ear. Some crews got so good at it, They could coordinate complex defensive patterns without using the intercom at all. Historians still argue whether the waist gun positions were worth the aerodynamic drag they created. Those open windows slowed the plane down and made it harder to maintain formation. Some groups experimented with plexiglass covers, but they frosted over in minutes. Others tried smaller windows, but that restricted the field of fire. In the end, they kept the big open rectangles because in aerial combat, being able to shoot back matters more than fuel efficiency. The shells that miss you are almost as dangerous as the ones that hit. A 20mm cannon shell passes through your position, missing you by inches, punching through one side of the fuselage and out the other. The holes it leaves are perfectly round, about the size of a golf ball, and they whistle in the wind like Satan's tea kettle. By the time you land, your plane looks like Swiss cheese, and the ground crew chief shakes his head. How the hell are you boys still alive? You don't have an answer. By all rights, you should be dead 5 times over. Sometimes the arithmetic of survival doesn't add up, and you just have to accept the gift. The tail gunner position is solitary confinement, with a view of your friends dying. You're separated from the rest of the crew by 30 feet of aluminum tunnel, sitting in a glass and metal bubble at the very end of the plane, like a period at the end of a sentence. The only way in or out is to crawl through a passage so narrow you have to remove your parachute. Once you're in position and the tail wheel retracts, you're cut off. If the plane breaks in half, which happens more than anyone wants to admit, you're riding the tail section down alone. Your view is spectacular in the worst possible way. You can see the entire formation behind you. Watch the fighter attacks develop. See the flak bursts walking through the bomber stream. You're the first to spot fighters coming up from 6 o'clock, the first to engage them, often the first to die. The mainstream fact is that tail gunners were credited with the most fighter kills. What they don't tell you is that's because German fighters favored rear attacks, and you were literally the last line of defense. When a 109 bore in from dead astern, it was you or him. No middle ground. The isolation is crushing. In other positions, you can at least see another crew member, make eye contact, share the terror. Back here, you might as well be flying a separate aircraft. The intercom is your only connection to humanity, and when it fails, which it does with depressing regularity, you're absolutely alone. During one mission, your intercom cuts out over Holland. For the next 4 hours, you fight your war in silence, watching mouths move in other aircraft, seeing fighters attack, firing at shadows, never knowing if your crew is alive or dead until you land. The tail guns are twin 50s, same as the ball turret, but the position feels different. You're sitting upright, almost comfortable if you ignore the fact that you're facing backward in a flying machine going 160 miles per hour while people try to kill you. The armor plate behind your seat is a joke, about as thick as a cookie sheet and roughly as protective. The plexiglass around you offers great visibility, but zero protection. When cannon shells hit tail positions, they tend to find the gunner. You've seen tail sections with the gun still perfectly functional, but painted with what used to be the operator. Your field of fire is theoretically excellent. You can cover the entire rear hemisphere of the aircraft. In practice, you spend most of your time trying not to shoot off your own plane's tail. The rudder and elevators are right there. Big, beautiful targets that your guns would love to chew apart. More than one tail gunner has damaged his own aircraft in the heat of combat. There's even a mechanical stop on the gun mount to prevent this. But when you're tracking a fighter through a high deflection shot, that stop feels like handcuffs. A quirky detail from the tail gunner's world. Many painted names or slogans on the inside of their position, where only they could see them. Exit only. No parking. This end up. Others kept tallies of everything. Missions. Fighters engaged. Times they'd thrown up from air sickness. The tail moves more than any other part of the plane. One gunner famously painted a detailed picture of his girlfriend on the armor plate, figuring if he was going to die, her face should be the last thing he saw. The ground crew found him after a mission over Berlin, slumped forward, 3 20mm holes in his back, her painted eyes still watching. Historians still argue whether the tail position was the most dangerous or just felt that way. Statistically, ball turret gunners died more often, but tail gunners had more psychological casualties. The isolation, the backward-facing view, the knowledge that you'd see death coming but be unable to avoid it. It broke men's minds. You develop a fatalistic humor. When new replacement gunners arrive, scared and eager, you tell them, "The tail gun is great. You'll never see what kills you." They laugh nervously, not understanding you mean it as comfort. The worst moments come when you watch other planes die. A fort in the formation behind you takes a direct flak hit and simply disappears in a ball of fire. Another gets its tail shot off. You watch the severed rear section tumbling past, close enough to see the tail gunner inside, still alive, still conscious, his mouth open in a scream you can't hear. There's nothing you can do but watch him fall 20,000 feet to his death, later, safe on the ground. You'll tell the intelligence officer about it in flat, emotionless terms. Aircraft 4231786 lost at 1347 hours. Grid reference Romeo 7. No shoots observed. You don't mention the tail gunner's eyes, how they looked right at you as he fell. Fighter attacks from 6 o'clock are personal. You can see the German pilot's face, see him hunched over his gun sight. When he fires, you watch the muzzle flashes, see the cannon shells coming like glowing baseballs. You fire back, your tracers and his passing each other in mid-air like deadly correspondence. Sometimes you win. Watch your bullet stitch across his engine cowling. See him trail smoke and roll away. Sometimes you lose. Feel the impacts as his shells punch through your position. Feel the sting of plexiglass splinters. The warm wetness that means you're bleeding, but you're too busy to check where. The top turret is supposedly the best gunner position on the bomber. You can stand upright. You have 360-degree visibility, and you're near the center of the aircraft where it's marginally warmer. You're also the gunner crew chief, responsible for all the defensive armament, which sounds impressive until you realize it means you get blamed when anything goes wrong. But the real curse of the top turret is the view. You see everything, every horror, every death, every moment when the war stops being abstract and becomes viscerally, immediately real. From your powered turret bubble on top of the fuselage, you have a god's eye view of the formation. You can see dozens of bombers in their combat boxes, each one containing 10 men you've drunk with, played cards with, lied about women with. When fighters attack, you watch them slice through these boxes like a scythe through wheat. During one mission to Munich, you have a front row seat as a B-17 directly ahead takes a rocket hit. The entire nose section, pilots, bombardier, navigator, simply vanishes in a flash of light. The rest of the plane, suddenly nose-heavy and pilotless, rears up like a dying horse before flipping inverted and spinning down. Your twin 50s can elevate almost straight up and depress to cover attacks from above, but the real advantage is psychological. You're not crammed into a tiny sphere or isolated at the plane's extremity. You're standing in a plexiglass dome like the world's worst snow globe, part of the plane, but above it. The mainstream fact everyone knows is that top turret gunners often served as flight engineers. What they don't mention is that this meant you got to watch all the ways a B-17 could fail. Engines catching fire, hydraulics bleeding out, control cables snapping like guitar strings. The duty that haunts you most is damage assessment. When the plane takes hits, you're the one who has to look and report. Number 3 engine is trailing oil. There's a hole in the right wing you could put a basketball through. Jenkins is hit in the waist. You become the narrator of your own potential doom, watching fuel stream from punctured tanks, counting the minutes until the engines drink the tanks dry. During one mission, you watch your left wing take a catastrophic hit. The flak shell punches clean through, leaving jagged metal peel back like a sardine can. You report it calmly. Left wing damage between engines 1 and 2. What you don't say is that you can see the main spar, the crucial beam that holds the wing on, and it's cracked halfway through. From your position, you develop an unwanted expertise in how bombers die. There's the slow death, engines failing one by one until the plane can't maintain altitude and drops out of formation like a sick animal leaving the herd. There's the quick death, direct hit to the bomb bay. 10 men transformed into atoms in a millisecond. There's the horrible death, fire in the fuel tanks. Men jumping without parachutes because burning is worse. You catalogue these deaths with the detachment of a mortician, because feeling each one would drive you insane. The top turret position makes you a priority target. German fighters know that knocking out the top turret eliminates the bomber's best defensive position. When they come in from 12 o'clock high, you're shooting almost straight up, your neck craned back, watching tracers and cannon shells exchange passages like deadly letters. A 20mm shell clips the edge of your turret, shattering plexiglass across your face. You keep firing, blood streaming from dozens of tiny cuts, because stopping means dying. The quirky historical detail: many top turret gunners wore modified tanker goggles to protect their eyes from plexiglass fragments, making them look like goggled insects in their domed world. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll on bomber crews was properly recognized. From your position, you become an unwilling psychiatrist, watching men break in real time. You see a waist gunner freeze during a fighter attack, standing slack-jawed as a 109 stitches holes around him. You watch your bombardier curl into a fetal position after flak kills the navigator sitting next to him, refusing to man his gun, refusing to drop the bombs, refusing to do anything but whimper. The pilot orders you to go forward and take over the bombardier's position, so you leave your guns and crawl through the plane, past men who are wounded, dead, or wishing they were. The worst mission comes 3 weeks before your tour ends. You're over Merseburg, the most heavily defended target in Germany. When the fighters hit, not ones and twos, but an entire Jagdgeschwader, 60+ fighters in coordinated attacks. From your turret, you watch them work with terrible efficiency. They know exactly which bombers are damaged, which are straggling, which have wounded aboard. They're not just trying to shoot down bombers anymore. They're trying to break the entire formation's will. You swing your turret constantly, firing at fighters making passes at your plane, at your squadron, at anyone you can reach. The barrels of your guns glow cherry red, and you're down to your last ammunition box. Below you, through the plexiglass floor of your position, you can see the ball turret gunner isn't moving, hasn't moved for the last 10 minutes. The intercom is chaos. damage reports mixed with death rattles. You're the only functioning gunner in the middle of the plane, responsible for coverage that 3 men should be providing. This is what the top turret really means. Not the best position, but the last position. The gunner who has to watch everyone else die and keep fighting anyway. Mission 25 arrives like a birthday you never thought you'd see. The briefing officer pulls back the curtain to reveal today's target. Pilsen, Czechoslovakia. Not the worst, not the best. Just another dot on the map that people will die trying to reach. Around you. The other crews react with the usual groans and nervous jokes. But you feel oddly detached. You've reached that strange place where fear and fatalism cancel each other out, leaving only a numb determination to get through one more day. The replacement crew next to you, kids who arrived last week, keep asking questions about flak patterns and fighter tactics, so you want to tell them it doesn't matter, that survival is mostly luck dressed up as skill. But you remember being them once, 1,000,000 years and 24 missions ago. Your fort today is Lucky Lady, though she's on her 3rd crew, and the ground chief mentioned she took a rocket through the waist last month that killed 2 gunners. You settle into the ball turret with the practiced ease of someone climbing into their own coffin. Everything is automatic now. Oxygen check, gun check, heated suit check, still broken, naturally. As you taxi out, you notice your hands aren't shaking anymore. Somewhere along the way, your body accepted that this is normal, that human beings were meant to freeze in tiny spheres while other human beings try to murder them. The human capacity for adaptation is either miraculous or deeply disturbing. The mission unfolds with brutal normalcy. Flak over the target is moderate, meaning only 2 planes from your group go down instead of 5. Fighters make half-hearted passes. Me-109s flown by kids younger than you. Their attacks lacking the precise murderous intent of the veterans you faced a year ago. Most of Germany's best pilots are dead now, replaced by children with 20 hours in type, thrown into combat like kindling into a fire. You shoot at them, they shoot at you. Everyone goes through the motions of trying to kill each other, because that's what the script demands. A piece of flak the size of a golf ball punches through your turret, missing your head by inches. 6 months ago, this would have terrified you. Now you just note it in your log and keep scanning for fighters, coming off the target. Something goes wrong with Lucky Lady's luck. Number 2, engine starts streaming oil. Thick black smoke that tells you a line's been cut. Then number 3 starts missing. Probably flak damage to the magnetos. You're losing altitude, dropping back from the protective formation. This is how it happens. Not in some climactic battle, but through the slow accumulation of damage, systems failing one by one until physics wins. The pilot's voice over the intercom is strained but steady. We're losing altitude. Navigator, give me a heading for Switzerland. Switzerland. Internment. Your war ending not with a parade, but with years sitting in a neutral country while everyone else goes home. But Lucky Lady isn't done yet. The pilot and co-pilot work miracles with the 2 good engines. The flight engineer manually transfers fuel to balance the load. And somehow, impossibly, you maintain just enough altitude to stay with the formation's tail end. Every crew member who can move is throwing everything overboard. Ammunition, flak suits, anything to lighten the load. From your turret, you watch the empty brass casings stream out of the waist windows like golden rain. The mainstream fact everyone knows is that B-17s could fly on 2 engines. What they don't tell you is that can and should are very different concepts. And every minute on 2 engines is borrowed time paid back with interest. You make it to the channel, that beautiful stripe of water that means you're almost home. The white cliffs of Dover appear through the haze, and for the first time in hours, you allow yourself to think you might actually complete your tour. 25 missions, 300 combat hours. You've seen men die in every conceivable way, felt death brush past you so many times you've lost count, and somehow you're still here, still breathing, still inexplicably alive. The ball turret that was supposed to be your coffin has become your chrysalis, and you're about to emerge as something else, a survivor, that rarest of creatures in the 8th Air Force. Lucky lady touches down hard, the landing gear groaning under the stress of the emergency landing. As you climb out of the turret for the last time, your legs barely work. The flight surgeon is there with his clipboard, asking if you're injured. You want to laugh. How do you explain that everything hurts? That parts of you are broken that don't show up on X-rays? You've aged 5 years in 5 months. You've watched friends evaporate in puffs of smoke, held dying men while their blood froze to your gloves, been so certain of death that survival feels like a clerical error. That night in the officers' club, they throw you a party. Surviving 25 missions makes you a celebrity, living proof that the system works, that skill and courage can overcome odds. You drink their whiskey and accept their congratulations, but you're already fading from this place. Tomorrow, you'll be processed for return to the States. In a month, you'll be selling war bonds, telling sanitized stories to people who want to hear about heroism, not horror. In a year, you'll wake up screaming, still in that ball turret, still over Germany, the war following you home in ways the Pentagon never predicted. Historians still argue whether the daylight bombing campaign was worth the cost. From where you sit, drunk on survival and whiskey, the argument seems pointless. The war was what it was, necessary, horrible, and human in the worst ways. You raised your hand, climbed into a ball turret, and did your job while history happened around you. That has to be enough, because it's all you've got. Tomorrow, you'll board a transport headed home, leaving behind the brothers who didn't make it, carrying their ghosts in your dreams. 25 missions. You've earned your ticket out of hell. The only question now is whether hell will let you go. As our story winds down, let your breathing slow and deepen. Those brave young men who climbed into their turrets are all gone now. Their war finally over in the only way wars truly end. The roar of engines fades to whispers. The bitter cold gives way to warmth. And those endless hostile skies transform into the gentle darkness of sleep. Think of them not in their moments of terror, but in their moments after, home again, holding children who would never understand, building lives from the pieces that survived. The ball turrets are museum pieces now, their plexiglass clouded with age, no longer windows to horror, but simply artifacts of a time when boys did impossible things because they had to. Your bed is soft, your room is safe, and the only sounds are peaceful ones. Let their courage remind you that humans can endure far more than they should ever have to. And let their sacrifice cradle you into dreams where the skies are empty of everything but stars. Close your eyes now, and let sleep carry you somewhere kinder than history, somewhere gentler than memory, somewhere safe as home.